And we're engineers at Sun Microsystems and also the JRuby core developers. We've been using Java since basically when it was created. And as you can see on the slides, we've used a number of other technologies. We're working to make Ruby a first-class citizen on the Java virtual machine. And we're working to make the Java virtual machine a better host for various dynamic languages. So here's an agenda on what we're going to talk about. We're going to give a brief introduction to JRuby with a simple demo. And then we're going to give a brief introduction to JRuby on Rails with a simple demo. We'll finish it with some futures for JRuby and a question and answer period. So what is JRuby? JRuby is an implementation of Ruby on the Java platform. It's an open source project that was started in 2002, and we've tried as hard as we can to make sure that it's as compatible with Ruby 1.8.5 as we can make it. Since it's implemented in Java, we offer integration with Java. So it's easy to call Ruby from Java and Java from Ruby. JRuby is also a collection of additional projects, like Active Record JDBC, which is an active record connector that allows you to connect to databases through Java's JDBC technology. Another project we have is Gold Spec, which is a Rails plugin that allows you to bundle your Rails application into a deployable unit that allows you to deploy to Java application servers. And our big announcement today is that JRuby 1.0 is released. We feel it's ready for production use for Rails applications and general Ruby stuff. As we said, we think the compatibility is very good with Ruby 1.8.5. So good, in fact, that ThoughtWorks is offering production support for JRuby. Please download it and try it today. And now to Charlie.
Okay, so some Ruby users wonder why JRuby would be useful. Here's a few of the reasons. Performance is getting better and better. We've done a lot of work to improve performance over the past year. We think that we can scale very well because JRuby uses native threads. It uses Java's threads, but they're usually just native threads with no giant lock, so it's true concurrent threads. We have started to work on a compiler for Java, or for JRuby, to compile Ruby into Java bytecode. Of course, you can also call Java libraries, and Ruby fits into the Java platform very well. And this may be an easier way for Ruby to get into large enterprises and businesses that have a lot of Java already, or have many Java servers already. So on performance, here is a little Fibonacci benchmark. On top is JRuby. On the bottom is Ruby 1.8.5. You can see JRuby starts out a little bit slower because the JVM takes time to optimize it. And then JRuby ends up running a little bit faster than Ruby 1.8.5. And we are faster for probably most of the benchmarks that are out there, but for general performance, we're not quite sure whether we're as fast or faster yet. But a lot more work to do on performance. So now I'll demo a little bit of JRuby. So you all know IRB, of course. This is our IRB using Swing, Java's GUI library. And we have all the same basic features, although our completion is a little bit different. So that's neat. But of course, it's JRuby, and this is a JVM, so it can call Java code. I'll pull in a frame class.
Sorry, please use a big font. I cannot see.
It is a little small. Here, I'll do it in here.
Thanks.
Better? Okay. So we include Java in. Then, like Java, you can import classes. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so I'll create a frame. We can set the size of the frame. We make Java methods look like Ruby methods. Okay. So we
have to show completion on.
So we have our frame. Now we can, of course, change it again. And it's bigger again. But we'll also add a button to it. And we'll add it to the frame. And show it again so the button comes up. All right. Okay, so now we'll make the button do something. So we'll use the action listener interface from Java. And we can implement the interface using Ruby code. We'll define the action performed method with an event and change the text of the button. Okay, we have our listener class. We'll add a new listener to the button. And we go back, and it works. So any Java libraries, you can write Ruby code to use them. We'll go back to the slides now. Okay, so the other half of this is JRuby for Rails developers. Now, one major reason why JRuby is nice for Rails developers is deployment. We can deploy Rails apps as normal Java web applications in any application server, although we really like Glassfish. It's a very nice server. There's also in Glassfish version 3 a Rails module that lets you deploy it more like Mongrel. Just type in a command with the directory for the Rails app, and it will start it up. And that's production ready. It will be as many connections as you want, database connection pooling, all of that. As far as database goes, we have very broad support. JDBC supports many, many databases. I'll show you in a moment. Of course, you can call existing Java libraries and existing services, so it can fit into existing applications. And we think it's maybe easier to switch your web framework than to switch your whole application architecture. So you can keep your existing servers, but start using Rails today, or just Ruby. So here are the many, many databases supported by JDBC. I don't know most of these. But the blue ones are fairly well supported in JDBC now, or they're very well supported. These are the ones you're probably using for the most part. And of course, you can use Java. So Java EE is a pretty big cow, but there's a lot of good meat on that cow. There's many libraries that you may want to use from Ruby. And these have been tested in production for years, and they run very well. So Rails users get that advantage too. And now Tom will demonstrate a little running JRuby on Rails.
All right, I've already installed JRuby and the gems necessary to do Rails development. Control-C. And I've created a small application called Buggy. So let's run that.
Hopefully it's not true.
Hopefully it works. So the first thing we'll look at is the Rails splash screen here. Whoop. Jet-lagged fingers. So the first thing we see here is this Java. It means it's running on JRuby. And then we see that the database adapter we're using is JDBC. If we go back and look at the database configuration, we can see that we're using a JDBC adapter. This is that active record JDBC project I mentioned earlier. And we have this URL that specifies we're connecting to a MySQL database.
And if this is in an application server, that URL can be a connection pool as well.
So let's see how much I know about Rails. Unfortunately, not a lot. But this application works. Okay, this isn't particularly interesting. We're just showing that JRuby can in fact run Rails. So let's actually deploy this to a Java application web server. We're going to do that with the Gold Spike plugin that I mentioned earlier. I already have that plugin installed into this Buggy app. And this plugin goes and installs a set of rake actions. The one I'm going to run will actually generate a WAR file. A WAR file is basically just a fancy zip that...
Here, let me do something quick. So you can actually see it add all the libraries.
The command's smart and won't add stuff if it's already been added.
There, that looks more interesting.
So yeah, it's adding all the libraries, it's adding the application that I've written, it's adding the gems that it needs, and it's bundling it up into a fairly decent sized file. buggy.war.
It also includes one file for JRuby, which is a full Ruby interpreter, Ruby implementation, and the whole standard library, all in the one file.
Now I'm going to run a command which is going to go and deploy to the Java application server Glassfish, which happens to be a Sun open source project. Deploys happened. Well,
It takes a minute for Rails to start up.
the very first hit takes a long time, but after that it's faster, we promise. And there we go.
So this is Rails application running in a Java application server. And you can have as many Rails applications in one server as you want. Okay. So, the future of JRuby on Rails. We want Rails to be a first-class web framework for Java developers. We would like Java developers to think of Rails first when they're deciding on a web framework. We want to improve Java EE support for Rails, make the connection pooling work well, make WAR file deployment work better, more easy to use, and also add in the Rails magic for all of the different Java EE libraries to make them feel more like Ruby. We also want to make it easier for Rubyists to use JRuby on Rails by porting C-based libraries that you're used to using, like RMagic. We already have Mongrel and HProcot working in JRuby. We have ports of those. And continuing to make performance better and make compatibility closer to Ruby. And there are the URLs. You can go to jruby.org to download it right now. 1.0 release is there. Ruby Spec is an English wiki trying to be an English Ruby manual for Ruby users and Ruby implementers. So if you can help there, please do. And Tom and I both have blogs at these addresses. And I think we're ready for questions. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。Thank you。質疑応答に入らせていただきます。何かご質問がある方は、じゃあ真ん中ら辺の白い方。
I have two questions related to the first demonstration. First one is you showed JFrame set size method is converted to names like in Ruby's fashion and with underscore. But action listeners, action performed method is in camel case. What is the difference? And second question is, as you know, action listener has only one method. In Ruby, it is better to use a block to define this kind of listeners. Can you explain these two questions?
Okay.
I'll answer the second question first, that we actually have an issue open to add block support for interfaces that only have one method.
Yes, we do. I'll show that very quickly here. Include Java. For the other question, action performed, right now, since Java is looking for the action performed with a capital P, that's what we use to implement it. But we want to be able to do it with the underscore version as well, the Ruby version 2. So let's try this quick live demo. Impl, is it?
Mm-hmm.
So we have a runnable. Oops.
Oops, reference.
Okay, so you can do it with that as well. It's very easy for interfaces with one method. Okay, next question.
よろしいでしょうか。
Thank you.
次そちらの方ですかね。はい。
I have a question regarding performance. Do you have any scalability data to support your claim?
Questions about scalability?
Yes.
There are some people testing scalability with JRuby on Rails now, and they have reported very good results.
Okay.
We don't have any official numbers yet to say what the scalability looks like right now.
So we don't have any scalability performance test, or we don't have any standard benchmark yet, right?
Not officially. There are various web scalability tests, web performance tests that we can use with this, but nothing specific for Rails that I know of that would show that it scales well yet. We're hoping for more people in the community to help us test scalability and performance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
他に何かありますでしょうか。ではそちらの方。
In the demo, you used VI editor, right? I know you guys are from Sun Microsystems. Why do you not use NetBeans IDE? This question is not for fun. Just I wanted to see how it's well combined with Ruby syntax.
Okay.
Well, in the particular example where I used VI, it was just to view a file, and I wanted to use it with the big font, and I didn't want to change my font settings in NetBeans.
We're also trying to show that Ruby developers can just start using JRuby in the same way they use Ruby now. If they're using VI or TextMate or command line, it's the same thing. But NetBeans does have really excellent Ruby support that's coming along fast now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
ではそちら。
When you show this to Ruby developers, you get ooh, ah. What do you get when you show it to Java developers?
Java developers, they also ooh, ah for different reasons. They like interactive scripting of applications. They also like how quickly you can bring a Rails app. We didn't build a whole Rails app because most of you have seen that demo before. But we show the 5-minute Rails app demo to Java users, and they're ready to start using it most of the time.
Java developers are shocked when they can see that in 5 minutes you can make a web application. It blows their mind.
よろしいですか。はい、では他に何かありますでしょうか。はい、そちらの方お願いします。
I guess one cannot use an extension library with JRuby, is that right? But in my case, I use Ruby as a kind of glue language, which I mean that I do many numerical computations and graphics and even file input output stuff. And for those things, I use many extension libraries. So do you have good news for those who heavily dependent on extension libraries?
Well, if you have existing libraries, we don't have plans to run Ruby's C-based extensions yet. There may be a way, but it doesn't fit into the Java platform as well. However, for almost all of those extensions and libraries, there's an equivalent library in Java that you can use for the application. So there's numerical computation libraries and graphics libraries and I/O libraries, network libraries. So usually the library already exists, and there's no work to call into it. You just pull in the library and can start using it in JRuby as well. Thank you.
他に何かありますでしょうか。じゃあ後ろの方のそちらの方。
I have one question. JRuby, does JRuby support on-demand import like Java?
Like importing a whole package?
Yes.
You can do that. It's done using a const missing hook, const missing function. So it's not as performant as using the class directly, but it does work. Yes. It's like no, didn't work for that one. Well, it usually works.
But it does have a performance hit, so we recommend against doing this.
Yes. Usually it's best to do the class individually.
Thank you.
他に何かありますでしょうか。
Yeah, it's probably not a B thing, const missing.
よろしいですかね。それでは質疑応答終わります。お二人にもう一度温かい拍手をお願いいたします。
Thank you. Thank you.